in other words, you've got to look at this task as though you are going into the lab and prepare an experiment. In other words, you wouldn't get spiritual about that.
Okay.
And so why be spiritual with this task?
And when we say spiritual, that means even sacrum vocabulary, and doesn't necessarily mean religious terminology. It means anything that's emotionally sweet or where the adjectives are less than realistic.
It sounds like an affirmation of some sort that you would read from one of these metaphysical books or something. And you want to be careful, because that is, if you are responding in that way, then that is a characteristic of the vehicle, and you've got to overcome that. In other words, the next level are more, that members of the next level are more real than any human, because a human isn't even real. They're just a plant they're a real plant, but they have never reached the actual level of reality. Only you all have. We have, because we've gone through the graduating process from the garden, which makes you real once you graduate. Real of what you were striving to become, which is a member of the next level. Can you all understand it?
Everything beneath having become a beginner in the next level is just in the making stage. It doesn't really know what it's doing. It knows a little bit about what it's doing, but it even misinterprets that, so it can't know any reality. You see what we're saying? It might know that the car has flat when it has flat, that degree of reality, but it doesn't know anything else about its purpose or where it came from or where it's going or what its existence is, what it's to accomplish and its lessons. And it hasn't grown enough to be aware of those things in a real way, in an intelligent way. Only sees through illusion that might be labeled religious eyes or philosophical eyes or theories, and because it hasn't grown to be capable of seeing it for what it actually is. You follow that? It's impossible for it to see it at that point, or at this point, where you intercepted into your vehicles.
Well, it's as blind as a baby is when it's born. In other words, the baby doesn't know what it's in. At the time it's born, it just knows that it breathes and wants something to eat and diaper change and things like that. And a human is in that same category, but in a different way. It's as blind to what it's working toward. This is why so many people just flounder. They don't know what they want to do. And finally they have to kind of latch on to one particular goal. This is why so many people say, set a goal and stick to it. And once you arrive at that goal, then set another one. But in that way, in a sense, it's a good way for a human to respond during this process, because then they don't go through all this suicides and everything else, like just recently in the Plano area, which is not very far from, well, it's a suburb. They've had how many?
7 suicides.
Teenage kids. Just in a matter of a short period of time, and just the other day, a 14-year-old kid killed himself. And they had no reason. They couldn't figure out why they did it. And I think, in a sense, it's because they don't know enough about what they're supposed to be doing in life. It isn't just with humans, it's with, teenagers, it's with adults and anybody else who strives to find nothing in life to keep them really interested. And in a sense, this is about where the humans should be about now. It's time now for something new, which is what you all are presenting to them, and to raise them up to a higher level of understanding and thinking. this morning on CBS, they had the lady from Dallas, I think it was from Dallas, who was head of the suicide, whatever it's called.
Family Services or something.
Family Service Suicide Association or something. And they also had some people from Plano who
parents,
and they said that in that neighborhood that it's a beautiful area and that there's a high divorce rate.
A lot of money. And people are moving in and out a lot where kids can't make friends, their friends aren't stable. And in a sense, it's kind of like it's a little turmoil area where I'm sure they move at a fast pace. I don't know, but it seems like it by what they said. And which prevents the child from hooking onto something that's stable. And one particular child who killed himself last October, I think it was, or several months ago, was getting ready to go to college. And they thought he was very happy. And so they really don't know what caused the child to do this. Now, committed suicide the day before he was to leave, or a couple of days before he was to leave college.
Now, in my mind, using suicide as an example, in my mind, it seems to me like the individual hasn't latched into a category that he needs, that has been defined to him enough so that he knows what he's doing. It's like getting on a track. I've always felt like if you watch drivers driving through town when you're out in the road and see how erratic they are, and those people are an example of their mind and how they think, and which means sometimes they're pretty erratic the way they look like these computer games, where they sort of jerk across the screen and bump into each other and everything. And if cars were placed on tracks instead of left to go just any way they wanted to go, how they could do it, I don't know. But something
wouldn't be difficult.
Then it would be teaching the humans immediately to get set on a track. In other words, they're not taught. Only if they're lucky enough to have parents or someone who's raising them to teach them. Now, you've got to have a goal. You've got to decide on what you want to do. You have to stick to it. And no matter what, you can't change it. In a sense, that's good. It's like lawyers, if you're married if you're born into a family where everyone was a lawyer, in a sense, it's good that you are born into a household like that, because in a sense you fit into that track that everybody else is fit into. Now, this is a normal human thing. We're not talking about you all, okay? We're talking about how humans should grow up to be. And getting back to the cars on the track, if you look at it, if every human was raised to believe that they had to get on some track, whatever it is, in a sense, the human doesn't even have to stick to one that the family might already have going. He can make up his own, but he ought to decide and stick to it and work toward the end of accomplishing what he has.
She's not talking about one that won't leave the door open for improvement. She's talking about a process of improvement, not a process of stagnation.
Now, at the time that we're talking about this right now, we're putting this into the ether, okay? Because it's senseless for anybody to commit suicide, especially a teenager, when he doesn't even have the knowledge of what he's doing.
He hasn't accomplished any purpose.
Right. In other words, there's some place talking about getting people on the track will help the humans to know what to do. In other words, we're putting this knowledge into the ether. And as you think about this knowledge, you also will put it into the ether. In other words, humans might wonder, what can I do? We go through the mall sometimes on the weekend when we have things to do. And those people are just sitting around eating and doing absolutely nothing.
And they walk down the mall oblivious to the fact that others are walking. I mean, the majority of them walk in such a way that others have to get out of their way, because they're certainly not going to make any effort to be courteous to your approach. Do you know what we're talking about?
You have to almost say, get out of my way, so you can get around them, or trip them, or do something.
Or you really have to bystep them, because they're just like a herd of cattle headed for you, and that's...
Now, they have, some people probably live for the weekend, so they can walk around the mall. You know, that's their big weekend off from work. And, which has absolutely no purpose other than helping the merchants or the vendors there in the mall, which we know they have to do, but they still, we don't go to the mall to mall around or to walk around. We go because we have a reason for going. And that's why people should go to a mall. They should go because they need something. They need a pair of shoes, they need a pair of hose, or whatever it is that they need. Or need to get something to eat. But just to go and wander around doesn't make a little sense in my mind.
A lot of them go and sit, and like if T and I have to be there an hour or so going to this place and that one, we'll come back and see the same people sitting in the same places that they were when we got there. It's like they've come to spend the day. It's there. Instead of going to the park with Murphy, they go to the mall and camp there.
So now this is what you all have to change. In other words, we've got to get people on the right track. Give them a motive to live, other than to live from one paycheck to the next. Is it motive to live?
Well, a desire for betterment.
A desire for
improvement, yeah. For a reason.
Now, you can't put things in the matter, like you can't say now, people should become lawyers, people should become policemen, people should become this. We're not talking about you sending out thoughts like that. We're talking about what every individual should have some kind of goal. Whether it's a housewife, she wants to be a better parent, a better homemaker, which is an improvement, because the improvement is striving to do something better. Do you understand that? In other words, she can get up, make her bed, and fix breakfast, and wash the dishes, and dust can accumulate on the furniture, and the dust on the carpet, and bathrooms are dirty, but she feels like as long as the beds are made and the dishes are washed, that's all that matters. And but her goal should be to become a better homemaker, since that's her task.
For as long as it is. We're not saying, because we're really beginning to believe that the family housewife picture and the family unit as it is getting to be obsolete very, very quickly. But we're saying as long as you're in it, you should do a better job of it. You should keep her neater quarters and take better care of the ones who are your responsibility.
It's just like you all, whatever task you have, if you have an out-of-craft task or you have an in-craft task, then you should do it to the best of your ability, better than anybody else. Because you, in doing that, you are putting it into the ether, and you are sending it out for everyone else to do the same thing. And people for so many years took their jobs for granted. I think a little bit of it is they're beginning to appreciate their jobs now. And but for a while there, people would sit and eat and have more coffee breaks than they would do any work and do their fingernails and talk to their friends on the telephone and just goof off is all they would do. And now, with this recession that we just slowly are recovering from, I think a lot of people have gotten rid of the dead hand and are getting people who are really wanting a job and realize how badly they felt when they didn't have a job.
And to know that if they don't produce, they probably won't eat.
And so therefore they want to do the job the best they can, so they will work very hard to do a good job. So the change is happening if you all can just keep your eyes and ears open to what's going on in the world. But it still is going to take an awful lot of work on our part to get people to know how to go from there. In other words, somebody works real hard to get a good job, and they do a good job real good. And then all of a sudden, they have the choice of slipping into what everyone else slips into, taking their job for granted and becoming a little too familiar with the task and therefore forgetting what they went through during the time they were out of the job. And it becomes old hat to them because that's characteristic of the human. So therefore, they need something to go beyond once they get the job and have accomplished the job. In other words, they need to go somewhere from there, if that makes sense. And giving them thinking of what we're talking about will help them. Well, maybe if I went back to school, or I need a goal, just wait and see if goals don't start coming up. In other words, this is what everybody needs. Now, whether or not the goal is just a temporary one, like I said, you start out with one. And then once you slowly get there, you realize that it was only a goal to lead you to something else. But you should always have something. You should also always be on a track. And you don't want to ever get off of the track, because once you get off the track, then you become weakened. And you waver and you wonder what in the world is happening to me. And if you're young, then they might go and blow their brains out or whatever they do to kill themselves. And before they've even had the opportunity to learn from the experience that they set out to go through.
In a nutshell, in another way, the whole thing you've done since you've been in this class is you have made a desperate attempt at self-improvement as far as your mind's relationship with your vehicle. You have desperately tried to force that vehicle to improve in every way. Its habits, its way of thinking, its conduct, its countenance, its everything about it. And this is what T is talking about. If you could see that nothing has been as important to your task as the concept of self-improvement. And if you send that thought out so that more people have individually a desire for self-improvement. And like T says, they may set a little goal, and then when they reach that goal, that may not, they say, oh goodness, that was sure a shallow goal, and then they reach for a higher goal. But if they would try to improve everything about them, that is a goal in itself. And even if they recognize that I don't have to say that I've accomplished, to me one of the sad things about this existence, this level of existence in civilization, is the way people label their goals. They label the goal, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer, and when they reach that goal, then it's, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I haven't gotten to something that is satisfying. And so the goal shouldn't have been those labels of those careers. The goal should have been self-improvement. No matter what they did career-wise, Do you understand that? Because there's nothing wrong with someone going into a certain career and then seeing that it isn't doing what it should do for them, and they find a niche that they can move from that into something better. Better for themselves, not talking about just necessarily more money, but in improving themselves and improving others. Each time you have improved yourself or your vehicle, you have sent a very strong message of self-improvement to others. Haven't we said from the beginning of this genetic understanding that the biggest effect you can have on genes is with your thoughts? Or the genes of others is what I'm talking about, is with your thoughts and with your example. The genes that are transferred to offspring take many generations to make major improvements. Do you see what we're saying? But the genes that are passed directly through thought and example and conduct can make immediate impression on the genes of those who are receptive to that change. So, in a sense, if those humans wanted at their level to be on a road or a track of constant self-improvement, as much as you have wanted to be on your level road of self-improvement, they would also, by their example and their thoughts, the desire for that self-improvement, affect the genes of everyone around them. In other words, the accelerated process toward beginning members of the next level would really move at a rate much better than it's moving now. Because this terrible frustration that humans have of setting a goal for something, and when they reach that goal, it doesn't seem like it offered what they expected. And so then they have to find side indulgences to just pacify their existence till they die. And I think we're back to where we started talking, where some of these youngsters who, because of genetic improvement and intelligence, some of these youngsters, don't forget, are smarter, or should be, than their parents. And even are saying, goodness, I'm not sure that this is a place I want to live. In other words, they say, well, you may be happy with what you have. They may be talking to their parents. You may be happy with your two-car garage and your nice little house and your place that you go to on the lake on the weekends and being a member of First United Methodist Church and so forth. That may be a happy package to you, but it isn't a happy package to me. Now, there's nothing wrong with becoming aware that package is not significant. What's seriously wrong is opting to self-destruct instead of finding an appropriate package that would be more worthwhile. I mean, eventually they're going to have to stop living just for themselves. The whole reason a human is dissatisfied is because he's living for himself, and he can't find what he wanted for himself in this life. And so he becomes unhappy, right? He even becomes unhappy as an old person, because he thinks, goodness, I put out all that effort. I sent my kids to college. I did everything I could do for them, and they went rotten in spite of everything I did. And now everything's so bad in the world, and look at me in the mirror. I'm all wrinkled and gray, and I'm getting senile, and I'm rotting. What was all this effort for? He wouldn't be thinking that way if he weren't only concerned with himself. If he were concerned with what contribution he had made to the forward motion of his Heavenly Father's kingdom, in whatever terms he wants to look at that. In other words, if he wants to look at it as a Unitarian would look at it, or as an evolution mind would look at it, or as a Christian would look at it, it doesn't matter. But if he were, he would never feel cheated if he were devoted to the total motion of self-improvement of the things that surround him, the ones he comes in contact with, his neighborhood, his country. He would have no reason for ever feeling bad, because he would be able to make a contribution that would go on after him. And in other words, he would be living for that. Do you see what we're saying? And he would one day even wake up enough to recognize that he was going to go on as genes go on. Do you see what we're saying? That it wasn't the end. He would change that concept of the end of his life being his death, or the other extreme of that, or now it's time to go float in the cloud somewhere, you know. But he would recognize that he is multiplied by good genetic improvement, good example, good effort, and he's going toward a kingdom level or a human development, whatever terminology he is capable of putting it in, that would please the one who made him.
There's also some levels or some things that humans have to stop doing in order to be able to move to a more refined existence. And that is, they've got to stop committing crimes. In other words, it has to be obsolete to humans to be able to commit some kind of crime. The worst thing that I don't know what the worst thing could be that they would do, but I would think it would be maybe to say something cross to somebody. In other words, they should grow to be where they couldn't possibly kill somebody.
But he's not saying that everybody all over the world is going to reach this condition.
No, but I mean, they're going to. No, this is...
You're talking about a civilized world.
The more civilized world, right. But they've got to, because there are still gardens that are just gardens that, like over in the Middle East, I firmly believe that's just a place over there that next level is using as some kind of experiment or something.
Well, they're getting rid of weeds, and it's a very, very primitive existence. We should stay out of it. You know, there's no reason to bump off plants that are part of a more civilized element of society in one that is uncivilized.
But they really ought to, like our jails, according to the papers, the jails are getting, they have to build more to take care of the people. And the jails ought to, people ought to begin, if they were, begin to think that. Now, this is just as a very small, primitive, little tiny bitty seed that we're planting right now. And, but people should begin to stop thinking of ways to take care of their needs at the expense of somebody else, meaning robbing, killing, and so on like that. That's one thing the human kingdom needs to eliminate. We're talking again about the civilized world. Second, they need to be more refined in the way they live. I'm not talking about more expensive homes and things like that. Like even the family unit should even change. Remember in the Revelations, I believe it says where husbands and wives will live as brothers and sisters. I don't know that that's exactly that way. In other words, the way that John put it down, but I believe that there has to be a change in the way people live because it doesn't work. It isn't working. And again, that's a primitive way of existence. Primitive for the civilized world at this level that they're on at this time. And the way, of course, they're having children. Children should not be able to come to just anybody. It should be planned like the scientists are beginning to plan now, where they can they can almost create an incident where, a baby, where they can take a fertilized egg and even change the genes so that the color of the eyes and of the hair of the baby can match the parents. In other words, it should be almost like this.
In other words, they took a first egg from one woman, or no, they took an egg from a woman, not a fertile egg, and then they fertilized it. Okay, and then that fertilized egg, they can even correct certain genetic or rearrange certain genetic things in that fertilized egg, so that when they plant it in the person that's going to bear the fetus, it can have the characteristics of the one who is bearing the fetus. Do you follow that? And they know how to do that now, but of course they're scared to death because all the conservative people are so opposed to their doing.
But at least they're beginning to do it, though. They're beginning to see. This is, again, it's just a little tiny seed that's beginning to grow. Another thing, their education is pretty bad. I don't know if you've heard the news where the teachers in this area, I believe, all got F's. There not very many of them passed because they were not good teachers.
They had a test for teachers to try to figure out what the standard of teachers were for the area. And it was very, very, this is what he's talking about in this area, was very, very poor. Now, some years ago, the state of Texas had a very good rating, and it has gone down, and it's very low right now. They're concerned about changing.
I think it's not only in Texas, I believe it's...
Oh, yes, I don't mean Texas is the only one that's very low.
But what we're getting at is they're beginning to revise the system a little bit. And it has to be a better method of education than what they have been. So all of these things are the things you want to look for and to think about. You don't send out thoughts, but you think about how can the humans upgrade things? But you don't send out ways. Actually, by thinking about what's on this tape, will do all that it needs to have happen.
I've got to add one there that I think has been going on so long genetically that the youngsters today are addicted to it before they even have a chance hardly to have a choice. And that is living for physical sensation. Now, you can live for physical sensation, even physical sensation of a higher nature. Like what? Come on, somebody. What would be a good physical sensation to live for?
I might be wrong, but sensation when you feel you've accomplished something, or that you're flawed for something or whatever.
Okay, the sensation of accomplishing something, but what is something that you can do daily that will pay off in a sensuous, I'm not talking about sex, but will pay off in a physical satisfaction? Oh, that's a minor way, but there's a major way. Yes, but those are still minor things.
I thought the only thing I can think of is the completion of the task, or the involvement in the task.
Okay, well, don't you get a type of physical satisfaction when we give you a new understanding of something? When you get a new concept of how the garden grows? When you get a new straining, let's say we talk to you about something and you don't quite understand it, and you go off and you go back to your craft and you think about it and you listen to the tape several times, and it dawns on you what all that means and the ramifications of it, and you just soar with sensation. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, if humans would seek for mental sensation of perspective, intelligence, more realistic understanding of what makes things tick, how the garden grows. Where do they fit in that? What's the purpose? What's going to be my next purpose? And actually seek it as recognizing that it will have sensation. But they can't even get their eyes on that sensation because they're more interested in the sensation they get at the bar or in bed with someone. And those are such, the sensation of the sensuality is such a physically addictive sensation. It is to their mental growth as heroin is, because it's so euphoric physically that it just overshadows everything, and you don't really care to do anything worthwhile to improve yourself. In fact, most humans out there put on the show of being a successful lawyer, successful this, successful that, because that's part of the jewelry they wear, where really the main thrust of their existence is focused upon their sensuous satisfaction. And it's sad, but it's like their day isn't complete. The primary thing they were looking for that day, and some have even learned to admit it to themselves and to others, is that physical, sensuous satisfaction. They either want to get drunk or to have sexual experience repeatedly, or stay drunk and go to bed as many times as they can go in a day. And as long as you're so hooked on that level of physical heroin, you can't even see the value of sensation that could be found from a real high. In other words, a real high is not induced at that level. A real high is one where you're seeking for information that's higher than the present information you have. And when you find it, you feel an excitement. You feel a satisfaction. Now, and it will never grow old. It will never grow old. Now, if you're satisfied for a lower one, even heroin grows old. I have to get more and more and more heroin, and pretty soon I could be saturated with heroin, and I can't even quite wake up enough to get myself the next injection. Do you see what I'm saying? And the same thing with sensuality. You can get so involved in it that all levels of sensuality are physical, low physical satisfaction, that it's why not bump myself off. Because I can, subconsciously I'm recognizing I am zero, I'm wordless, even though I may have been able to master the big cover-up of holding down vice president of a company, having 3 kids, having 4 cars, having place at the lake, but all I'm really after is that cocaine, or that speed, or that 3 mistresses on the side. And rather than realizing that there's a whole world of sensation to be found mentally by growing in understanding and knowledge that would not leave you wanting. It makes you want more, but it does never do you any harm. And it's a satisfaction that pays off without any harm to you. It's the only good satisfaction, but in a sense it's still a physical satisfaction, even though it's a mental satisfaction. But it does not give you a satisfaction. Isn't that exciting to your brain? T and I will sit for days pulling in the next lesson, and then we'll say, goodness, class must not be ready for it, or our pulling would pay off. But that doesn't stop us. We keep pulling as if you were ready for it. And during that pulling, we're aching for new information, a higher understanding. Something is getting closer to the completion of our task. And the moment, whether it's because you are ready for it, or at the moment it does come in, talk about sensation. We are so satisfied that nothing could touch it. Certainly not something in a needle, or something that could be accomplished in a sex act. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, they could find that same at their degree of judgment, they could find that same satisfaction. And I think this is just another way of approaching what T was talking about earlier in goals. Because if they actually sought to be more intelligent, not more intelligent necessarily on just how to have a computer chip do more on the computer, that's already beyond their understanding. In other words, the computer does more than they know what to do with it. But because they don't have reason to do that with it yet. You see what we're saying? They've got a piece of machinery that's already more advanced than they know what to use it for. But if they would, now scientists get a little of this, because in a sense scientists are reaching for the knowledge of the heavens. Their mistake is that each time they reach one, they don't realize, even though they're beginning to realize that, somebody's going to learn something 3 months from now, it's going to make my theories all obsolete. But in a sense, they are reaching more. And there's no reason why every civilized human out there in his own way cannot seek for the same kind of information that a scientist has sought for. Believe it or not, that scientist did not get his information in his academic scientific courses or laboratories. He got it because he sought to know those things. Now, the same housewife or taxi driver who sought to know the same information, it is available to him without going to the scientific school, if he sought it. And
important that humans have to change. And plus, another thing that I've been mentioning, that was diet. And that also is in the process of changing. Nutrition, I believe these kids whom we were talking about just recently committing suicide, I believe that if they had been more healthy, they wouldn't have even thought of committing suicide. But anyway, the humans have to stop vibrating on these levels that we've talked about. They've got to show their work in this direction before, and they have to do what Bill said. They've got to seek something like the scientists seek. I can see how the next level they usually believe it. But if they can't prove it, then it's spiritual or it's black type things, you know what I mean? Like it isn't real. So the next level is presenting it to the scientists so that it will be proven to be more right. And even the scientists and all are beginning to talk about, doctors are beginning to talk about diet and how important nutrition is to the human.
And changing the habit of consuming.
Now, when they reach this stage where they can accomplish what we have talked about today, then you wonder, well, what else can they do? What else can they do on their Saturdays when they're off? Actually, humans don't need days off. What do they need it off for? To go sit in the mall?
They'll outgrow it. They'll find it eventually. They'll find it a bore.
Okay, now the thing of it is, let's say that they do have their days off, okay? And so what else is there to do besides go sit in the mall or go walk around and mingle or what have you? Well, the thing of it is, we don't know what to tell them. But they should accomplish what what has been on this tape, accomplish all of the things of improvement. And then when they reach that stage, the next level will tell them what to do.
Well, this process of improvement is an open-ended thing. That will lead them right up to the kingdom.
In other words, what they have to receive next, in other words, they have to get rid of these things before they can see what the next step is. It doesn't mean that it'll be steps of graduating, but it'll be the next step in the process of graduating. And the next step will give to them what they need to know. Now, that might take 1,000 years to accomplish all this. And this may call for another class to come here and do what you're doing. We don't know. It may be that the next level will set it up so that as soon as we all leave, that it will, we will set the stage by putting these thoughts here for humans to draw upon. And the next level will just keep the energy coming to them anyway. We know they're not going to turn it off and forget about it. They do. All this work will have been wasted, but the thing of it is, we don't have to stop and think, well, what else can they do on Saturday on their days off besides walk around? Because you don't have the ability to know what's the next thing for the human kingdom. And you don't put into their mind what they can do on Saturday. All we want to do is tell them how they can grow to become a more refined human in the process of becoming what the next level wants them to become. You don't want to be discouraged about what's happening over in the Middle East, because that has nothing to do with your task. Your task is, they're probably responding to what is happening over here. Do you know what I mean? In other words,
at their level.
At their own level. They can't respond any differently. And that's why civilized people should not be over there in that area. I don't mean that they're uncivilized. There are different levels of civilization over there. You can see it all around the globe, different levels of civilization. And this is a more refined civilization in this kingdom here, or in this garden here. And they're the ones we're talking about. We're not talking about just the United States. We're talking about England. We're talking about France. All the places that appear to be with more refined ways where they don't have to resort to fighting to get their point across. They try to handle it diplomatically. And everything in that kind of world, that kind of civilization, needs to be the ones to receive this information in order to be where the next level can give them more information on what to do on their Saturdays and Sundays off. You see that? So you don't inject your own thoughts. Oh, you can sit and meditate.
Yeah.
Go to church and pray. You can help the poor. You don't want to do that because that's your vehicle talking. All your task is to let the humans know is what is on this tape and what you have heard prior to this. And that's all you need to do. Just don't inject any of your own ideas.
I've got one last thing to say on this tape, and that is for every minute that you don't think about these things, even while you're doing other things, it's a minute wasted in your assignment. Do you see what we're saying? So if you waste hours and parts of your day worrying about this or thinking about that or all these other things, and you're not putting to us, you have an assignment. You have a homework that is 24-hour-a-day homework, and that is to put these thoughts out. To think them as you think them in the control of your own vehicle, and as you send these thoughts out there. That's your homework. That's your task. And the faster we get sufficient information out, saturating airwaves, the faster our task is done.
It's going to take a big united effort an awful part to get this going is by pushing a ton of bricks. And if we all work together and push on it, it will move more quickly. But if we have only a few working on it at a time, we can't get much accomplished. So it's really a big task, but we have it going.
So you can't sit like Quester's master on a slab inside of a cave and just put out those. You have work to do.